Hello and welcome to Creative Development with ISC. I'm Marta Diop, Managing Director of the International Finance Corporation. Today, I'm joined by Vitomir Maricic, an athlete who pushes the boundaries of human capability. He is a world champion freediver and holds numerous records, including the Guinness record for the longest breath hold, an astonishing 29 minutes and 3 seconds. Beyond sport, Vitomir is actively engaged in education, sustainable tourism, and ocean conservation. Vitomir, welcome to the show. Let me congratulate you. You have been involved in all type of free diving. You are holding the record of walking with one breath underwater, and you run for 100 meters underwater without breathing. So tell me a little bit. You started free diving 9 years, 10 years ago, competitively. How did you get to that?
My first competitions were 2017, 2018. I already was fully into it professionally. It was by chance, actually. I've always been very fond of underwater world and breath hold and apnea diving. However, because the sport was not really developed when I was young, I didn't pursue it as a competitive career. I was a professional in different sports. And then at one point, I got to assist a world record. It was like a little bit more extreme, a world record under ice. And I wanted to try for myself as well. So on that first try, I actually did the world record. I expected it. I was very confident that I will do it because I know from an early age approximately what I can do underwater. And I have always been kind of training things that are beneficial for breath hold. And then after that, I had an injury during my training in a circus. I was about to have a recovery of about 1 year. I did recover much faster in the end in a couple of months, but I decided that maybe it would be good to pursue freediving and learn a little bit more about it and compete in freediving because it's a very low impact sport that has basically no injuries and you can do it until you die. Basically, there's no age restriction for freediving. So I said I'm going to take this as a break. But in the end, it became my career. And now most of the things that I do are somehow connected to freediving.
You say that you were pro in another sports before, and it's not obvious to move from a pro sport to another pro sport like this. Was it a sport which was related to swimming? Were you a swimmer? Were you a basketball player like many Croatian?
I did many sports from an early age forward. I was playing basketball at a time, but that was not my last sport. I was more into free climbing, weightlifting, a little bit of triathlon before that. And the switch was kind of organic, I would say. It was very natural because freediving is something that I was doing since I was about 4 or 5 years old. So it wasn't something that was completely new. And also immediately I understood that I am at a very high level and that I could have much better results in this globally than in other sports. And with that also came the financial side supporting it. So in sports, it's also important that you have a way that you can sustain your life, that you have an income, whether it's from sports or from other businesses. And in previous sports, I was never at a world level. I was national champion in some sports, but this was very, very recreational and just covering the expenses of training. And in freediving, it's a very specific sport that has a sport side to it, but is also attached with a recreational industry, just like scuba diving is, for example. So through this industry, the athletes in this sport have a chance to earn and be professionals in this industrial part of it as well. And this was very appealing for me because it was at the same time something that I love doing and training, and at the same time something that could have extra revenue for me.
I was in Croatia recently, and when you think about Croatia, it produces so many top athletes from a country which is relatively small. That is impressive. There is something we say either in the DNA of the Croatian or in the system of education which brings so many top athletes. What is in the system in Croatia which allows you to produce so many top athletes like you?
I think it's very easy to get into sports, and sports are relatively highly appreciated. So the young generations, they can have some heroes in sports, and it's easy to have some role models through sports. Also, I think that the nation is traditionally very competitive, and some regions of Croatia are amongst the tallest people in the world on average. So that also helps having that kind of background. And also, the methodology is pretty good. It's a good mix of old school Russian, Bulgarian methods that were very present in Yugoslavia, but also Western European and American modern methodologies. So who wants to educate themselves? There's good schools in Sportway, there's good medical institutions, and there is a lot of clubs. A lot of young people are just there into sports. We consider it as an important part of general education. So sport is present throughout high school, university, elementary school, even in kindergarten. You will have sport classes, and there's even special sport kindergartens. So I think it's just accessible. And even without that, you'll always find kids playing in the streets. It's kind of a traditional thing here. I'm not sure if it's still like that. I believe it is, but when I was a kid, that was the only thing that we were thinking about. It was just maybe doing homework, going to school, and then spending the whole afternoon in sport activities.
For those who are not familiar with freediving, what is a day of a professional freediver?
That would greatly depend on a freediver and on the disciplines that he is training. But let's say generally, at my peak, I would be training 3 to 4 times a day, usually combining pool training, gym training, and then some other technique or mental training or stretching or something like that to supplement or to recover faster as an active recovery. But my approach was always with a very high volume and very much sport performance oriented. I wouldn't say that's the average in freediving. It's a very small sport still. So there's many approaches, and many people are not going to spend so much time in training, or they're going to focus, for example, exclusively on depth preparation. For me, I think when I entered the sport, coming from a sport background as a professional sport coach and as a professional athlete, I changed a little bit this approach with introducing a lot of gym training and different periods for different things. This is very known in modern sport, but in freediving, it wasn't so evident. So I think now more and more freedivers are going to switch into this type of training, and all the best ones already now are kind of doing the same pattern.
Your new target, I understand, is 160-meter deep diving.
I'm hoping, yeah, for between 160 and 170 meters. I'm going to enter this new discipline, which is unsanctioned in competition, only for records. It's going to be a variable weight dive. And hopefully, this dive will bring a lot of attention to first the human potential and then how we can use this attention to create awareness on some important topics around the world.
When you talk about what you are doing, mental is at the heart of it, the foundation of it. When we read about your last record, you were talking at some point, you said that your body was aching very much, but you said that after 20 minutes, you are in a different zone and you are able to continue. So can you talk a little bit about the mental side of it?
Well, it's definitely extremely important, and it's maybe in this sport more evident than in some other sports or activities. However, this mental component is really crucial for everything that you do at a higher level. Any high-performing athlete, like a 100-meter runner or a marathon runner or a swimmer, they need to master this mental approach in order to peak their performance and to give the best of themselves at any given time at a competition. This is an extremely complex skill, and it's maybe not so evident when you're thinking about running. You think, I just come there and run the best I can. But it's not so simple. This is something that's been trained for years, and they also do a lot of mental preparation in order to do so. And it's important to understand that mental preparation can only yield results if it's connected to training, because this is complementary and this is developed together. So your physical adaptation and your physical development must be assisted by your mental approach. You will never get so far if your mental approach is not cooperating. Also, this will then create different physiological processes that are going to connect your mental state with your physical output. And this is something that needs to be integrated all together and needs to grow together. And then, of course, you have this mental component that can be trained on top of that. There's different mental tools, different exercises that shape your attention and where you learn to cue your brain to have a specific type of attention on specific type of things that can give you results in a way that you want. Now, it can be very, very different depending on activity. For example, an elite swimmer needs to be really focused on his reaction time and start, and then providing the best of the organism in terms of sharpness, alertness, awakeness, and aggression. In freediving, it's completely different. We need to be completely stable and calm and emotionally disconnected from what we're doing, because it's not easy to handle that type of suffering for a sustained period of time. The body wants to go away from that. The body always wants to go where comfort is, but it's always possible to do different. And this is the willpower that we have, especially as humans. We are an animal that has an incredible willpower, and we can almost do anything with our mind. But in order to be able to do this, the physical preparation is necessary. And then the integration with the physiological connection of those two is something that's built for years.
You are now also having your own business. You are developing your own business in a parallel with your career as a professional athlete. Tell us about your business and tell us about how the skills that you built in sports are helping you now in your business.
My business is very versatile. I am constantly juggling different areas of business, and some of them are created and related to medical research and working with the medical departments on finding new protocols and discovering new stuff, making research papers from it. So part of it is going to be related to sport and sport performance. A big part of it is a coaching platform where we coach different athletes in different skills through a group of coaches, which is then done online and remotely. Part of it is live one-to-one education practice or group education practice with training camps for specific sports or specific skills. And this is relatively important because it helps grow the industry. It's something that opens new workspaces, and basically people start understanding that anyone can become a sport professional or instructor in freediving. And this opens a possibility for him to work independently, remotely, or anywhere. So that's one part of the business. There's also investment in prototypes and developments around the world on gear, on material, on developing new safety standards and protocols for the sport, and so on. So there's many of these aspects, but what I would say that benefits me most there is being able to handle a lot of things at the same time by prioritizing what needs to be done, by learning how to put them into specific boxes, delegate some boxes, and assert enough attention to some while removing some attention from other. Also, through sport, you learn the importance of recovery and the importance of pacing. So you learn that if you're constantly working on something, you're not going to be successful. You need to have periods of intensive work, of less intensive work, and periods of break and recovery. It's very easy to get overwhelmed by work, by not following a schedule or targets or something that looks towards your success. And people, especially private entrepreneurs, they will get lost in just working more and working more and working more and going more into a niche. What freediving as a sport and generally sports helps you with mentally, it gives you tools to take a step back and have a wider perspective on what is important for something that you're doing. So for your success in anything, there is never just one single factor. It's a multifactorial equation, and you need to balance these factors. In sport, a good plan and a good design of training will help you give enough adequate attention to each of these factors at a very specific time so that in the end you could be successful at what you're doing. And this is very easy to understand when we're speaking about something simple as sports. But then when you learn it there and understand it there, then you can translate it to business much easier. Also, some very practical things that are learned is that in many times emotional detachment from something that we're doing creates much better results. And this is very important in sports because it's so easy to get stressed or to want something too much or to be hurt by something that didn't play out the way you wanted. Through this, we build different types of expectations, and healthy expectations in sport, just like in business, just like in life or relationship, is that you're not always going to win, and it's not always going to be fair. Sometimes you're going to invest a lot and get nothing back. But if you understand that in the big picture and in the process of what you're doing, this is to be expected and this is something that will happen, then you're less stressed and less traumatized about it. And you understand that consistent investing of a time on a specific plan is going to give results a little bit after that. So I think these overall general, let's say, life lessons and experience are very useful to bring from sports to a business environment, for example.
I fully agree with you, and I think that this is something that needs to be practiced daily to be able to master, because it's so easy to get emotional and to get to lose a little bit that distance that is required to make the right decision in the long term. What you say makes a lot of sense.
To accept failure for people in the beginning is very stressful, and they don't understand the learning that can be done from failure. And then they start developing fear of failure. And if you have a fear of failure, you have a pressure to make decisions. And with that kind of pressure, you're not creating good decisions. If we switch that perspective around, which is necessary in sport, and accept failure as just one of the possible outcomes, that's definitely going to happen at some point, and it's fine to accept it, then the pressure is a little bit off, and we understand that this is a part of the process. And I many times say to people, only when you're ready to accept failure, you're ready to succeed truly.
But let me turn to Sea Shepherd. You are an ambassador for Sea Shepherd. Tell us a little bit about that organization.
For me, that's an organization that I decided to put my trust in and collaborate with them on their projects, because I like their approach of being an action-taking organization. And this means that they are really fighting for the causes they believe, physically in the ocean and politically, trying to change the laws and trying to get a better legislative framework for what needs to be done. And I believe that these things are a high priority for people and everyone on Earth, because the sea seems to be the most endangered part, even though it seems that it's indestructible and huge and vast, but it's a very fragile ecosystem. And the overfishing that's happening constantly in all the seas, now even the high seas, is something that can damage that ecosystem very easily. And small changes in that ecosystem create huge changes in the atmosphere, which affects everyone. And this is not going to be something that's going to be easy to reverse. So we need to act preventively, and we need to fight to conserve and protect the ocean and all its inhabitants.
Absolutely. This is a reason why, at IFC and the World Bank Group, we have been doing a lot of work on trying to find incentive for a company to invest and protect the marine ecosystem. Another important thing which for us related to the sea is tourism. We believe that tourism is a huge job creator, and Croatia is a good example of it. It needs to be done in a sustainable way, because we need to make sure that the resources are protected in the long run. So we are very much in the same space, because it's also something which is related to people, condition, jobs, living, and sustainability. And I am personally very sensitive to that. I'm coming from a country which is very coastal, and we know what overfishing can also do to the poor people who end up, migrating to other places because they cannot make a living out of fishery like they used to do in the past.
This last record that I did was intended to create a news that will go around the world and generate attention on exactly this. And I intend to do another record which will surpass 30 minutes, hopefully again to have the same effect and to just create an avalanche of news and pushing the things that are important to push in the first place.
If you want to leave us with a last word about ocean, marines protection, what do you think is currently the bigger threat? Is it marine plastic? Is it coastal erosion?
Fishing, 100%. There is no sustainable fishing anymore. That needs to be clear for everyone. And there is very, very few protected zones that are truly protected. And plastic is not good, of course. Coastal erosion is not good. Overfishing is something that can create massive damage within 10 years. So if we continue to overfish sharks, for example, we will lose an apex predator, which will completely disrupt the ecosystem, and we will not have fish. So we will not have anything. The movement of the sea will stop. The algae will be different. The production of oxygen will be different. The carbon footprint is not going to go into the ocean anymore. So we have a huge, huge ecological problem for the atmosphere. So this is something that I see as the most immediate threat. On the other hand, it's also something that's the easiest to solve. We only need a few protected pools that are highly protected, because we have seen in many studies, just like we have seen how easy it is to disrupt this ecosystem, it's so easy for the sea to rebuild itself, but it needs to be left alone. It needs to be protected. Over a period of 4 to 5 years, it's incredible how much these areas can blossom and overflow into everything around them. So the fishermen and all the industry living from this will actually prosper from protection. It will not damage anyone, but they need to understand that this is an investment and this is a process, and they need to respect these restrictions and limitations. So we need to find a way to communicate this, to create this awareness, and to create strict laws and rules and limits on what is protected and what is not, so that we can save the whole ocean and the whole sea. But somehow we're failing to create this. And I really think this is the most eminent threat.
Vitomir, thanks so very much for taking the time, and good luck for the next attempt. I'm sure that you're going to beat the record.
Thank you. I wish you a successful continuation of this podcast and everything that you do. I think it's a very good thing to get people involved in topics like this and to spread topics like this that are helping build a better world.
This is a podcast of the International Finance Corporation.